Let's start here, with the thought that quietly steals your confidence. I'm not the man I used to be. It sounds simple, maybe even honest, but this one line can do more harm than most people realize. You see, when that thought settles in, it doesn't just stay in your head. It starts sending signals to your nervous system, to your blood flow, even to your hormones. And for men over 60, whose bodies are already more sensitive to stress and internal pressure, that one belief can act like a switch, turning off arousal before it even begins. It's not your age that blocks desire. It's what you've been taught to believe about aging. And if you've ever found yourself lying next to someone you care about, heart racing, mind full of doubt, feeling like your body won't cooperate, I want you to know, I've seen this before, and you are not broken. You're human. And that voice in your head, it doesn't speak the truth. I remember one patient well, George, 67, widower, lives just outside Fort Worth. He'd been married over 35 years when he lost his wife to cancer. After 2 quiet years, he finally met a woman at his church, kind, funny, someone who made him feel seen again. They started having coffee on Sundays, then walks in the park, and eventually she invited him over for dinner. That night, George called me, not because something happened, but because nothing did. He told me, "Doc, I froze. I didn't even try. I just thought, what if I disappoint her?" And under that was another fear he hadn't said out loud. What if I'm not a man anymore? I shared with him something I've learned in my work. The body often listens to the thoughts we repeat. And George had been repeating that same quiet fear for years. He wasn't lacking testosterone or desire or connection. He was carrying around an old definition of manhood, one that didn't leave room for grief, for change, for second chapters. Over time, we worked together, not with pills, not with pressure, but with practice. Practice in speaking kinder to himself, in letting go of the idea that he had to perform, and in focusing more on connection than on outcomes. A few months later, he called again. There was warmth in his voice this time. He said, "We didn't rush anything. We just laid there, close, and that was more than enough." That's when I knew he had let go of the man he used to be and finally met the man he still was. What I often recommend in these cases is something gentle but powerful. Change the script in your own mind. If you catch yourself thinking, "I'm not who I was," try replacing it with, "I'm still me, just with a different story now." And let that be okay. Try spending more time in small physical closeness, not sex, not goals, just presence. A hand on a shoulder, a kiss without expectation. Letting yourself feel warmth without pressure allows the nervous system to relax, which is where real arousal begins. And if you need a cue, try this. Before intimacy, take a breath and say, even quietly, just to yourself, "There's no test here, only trust." Because when your brain feels safe, your body responds naturally. And here's the truth I want you to hold on to. Your worth isn't tied to how strong or fast or ready your body feels in any given moment. Your worth is in your presence, in your patience, in the fact that you still show up, even with doubts. That makes you strong. That makes you real. And sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is allow himself to be fully seen, even when he doesn't feel perfect. Because life hasn't ended. It's simply offering a different kind of intimacy now, one that's deeper, warmer, and more honest than you may have ever known before. Here's one that comes up more often than men are willing to admit. I'm going to let her down. It doesn't always sound exactly like that in the mind. Sometimes it's just a quiet tension, a pressure that creeps in right when things are starting to feel good. But make no mistake, that fear of disappointing your partner is one of the quickest ways to shut everything down. Because what starts as a thought in your head turns into stress in your body, and stress is a major blocker for arousal. The moment your brain shifts into performance mode, the body goes into defense mode. Blood flow drops, muscles tighten, and instead of ease, you feel hesitation. And for men in their 60s or 70s, who already have a bit less physical margin than they did at 25, that kind of mental stress becomes a real roadblock. But the good news is, this is not permanent, and it's not a personal flaw. It's just a habit of thought, and it's a habit that can be unlearned. I'll never forget Larry, a 72-year-old retired Army officer from Arizona. He was always composed, always the guy others turned to for advice or calm leadership. But when he came into my office, he looked like a man carrying a silent weight. His wife had passed years ago, and for the first time in a long time, he'd started dating. Again, a woman named Janine, widowed like him, with grown children and a love for jazz. They connected deeply, but each time things became physically intimate, Larry would freeze. He told me, "It's like my body checks out the second she touches me, and all I can think is, she deserves better than this." He was terrified that he'd raise expectations and then not deliver. Not because he didn't want to, but because he wasn't sure if he still could. And that thought grew bigger with each quiet night that ended in avoidance. It wasn't dysfunction in the physical sense, it was fear. We worked through this slowly. I shared with him what I've learned from years of talking to men just like him. When your focus is on not failing, you miss the very thing that allows connection, being present. Larry started practicing a different kind of approach, where instead of seeing intimacy as a test, he saw it as a space for closeness, even silence, even humor. He had one conversation with Janine that changed everything. He told her, "I'm nervous. I want to be close to you, but I don't want this to be about pressure. Can we just be together?" And her response was simple. "That's all I ever wanted." A few weeks later, Larry told me they'd spent the night holding each other, laughing, even dozing off. No pressure, no shame. And slowly, his confidence started coming back. What often helps in this situation is to simply make the conversation part of the connection. I tell my patients to say something like, "I care about this moment, not how it ends. Let's just be close." That one line lifts a huge weight off your nervous system. When your partner hears that, it tells her she's not being judged either. And now you're both allowed to relax. The body needs safety before it can be responsive, and safety starts with honesty, not performance. Take the time to breathe together, even just sit close for a few minutes without needing to move forward. You'll be surprised how powerful stillness can be. And here's something I hope you hold on to. You're not here to pass a test. You're here to share a life. No one who truly wants to be with you is keeping score. The strength you show, by staying present, even when you feel unsure, is more valuable than anything you could prove with performance. You are worthy of connection simply because you're human, not because of what your body can or can't do in a single moment. And real intimacy doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with truth. Give yourself permission to just be and watch how your body follows your lead. Let's talk about one of the most damaging thoughts a man can carry into the bedroom. It's not going to work. It usually starts after one awkward or disappointing experience, which can happen to anyone at any age. But when you're over 60, that moment doesn't just sting, it sticks. And if you're like most of the men I talk to, that one thought keeps showing up, louder and more convincing each time. The problem isn't the moment itself, it's what your mind decides it means. The body may still be capable, the heart may still want closeness, but when your brain is convinced of failure, it quietly tells your body to hold back, to not even try. That's how a single moment of doubt turns into a pattern, and that pattern becomes a self-fulfilling loop. The good news? It's reversible. But the shift doesn't start in your body. It starts in your mindset. Because it didn't work once doesn't mean it will never work again. That's a fear-based script, not reality. I remember working with a man named Tom, 70 years old, a farmer from a small town in Iowa. Proud, steady, the kind of guy who could fix anything with his hands but never talked much about feelings. He came to see me after 6 months of avoiding intimacy with his partner, Susan. The first time they tried, he lost his erection partway through. Nothing dramatic, just one of those moments where nerves get in the way. But instead of brushing it off, Tom internalized it. She didn't say anything, he told me, but I saw it on her face, disappointment. From then on, every time they got close, his mind jumped ahead to the moment it might go wrong again. That anxiety? It grew arms and legs. Eventually, he avoided intimacy altogether. The frustrating part? Physically, Tom was fine. He had no vascular or hormonal issues, but his brain had convinced his body to stay guarded. That's when we started, working on something deceptively simple, tracking pleasure. Not performance, not results, just noticing what felt good, even outside the bedroom. I asked him to write down one thing each day that made him feel comfortable, relaxed, or connected. It could be a hug, a warm shower, a memory, even a meal. Slowly, Tom began to reconnect with physical sensations that weren't tied to pressure. He stopped treating intimacy like a test and started treating it like exploration. Over time, that pressure loop loosened and his confidence started coming back, not because his body changed, but because his expectation did. What often helps, Men Like Tom, and Maybe You, is something I call a sensation journal. It's not about what went wrong or what you're afraid of. It's about reminding your brain what feels right. Start by jotting shuts the door on intimacy. I'm ashamed of my body. This one doesn't always come out loud. It shows up in small ways: skipping the mirror, turning the lights off, keeping a shirt on in bed, avoiding a partner's touch. And with age, as the body changes, weight gain, softer muscles, skin, that doesn't look quite the way it used to. Many men start to see themselves not as they are, but as they fear their partner might see them. The problem is, shame doesn't just live in the mind, it settles in the body. It makes you pull back when you want to lean in, disconnect when you're craving closeness, and stay quiet when you're longing to be seen. And physiologically, when shame shows up, it tightens everything. It shifts your nervous system into protect mode instead of receive mode. And when the body doesn't feel safe, it won't respond, even when the desire is there. I say this not to discourage you, but to help you see what might really be getting in the way, not your body itself, but the story you're telling about it. I remember Harold clearly, 68, retired city bus driver from Milwaukee, spent most of his life behind the wheel, clocked in early, clocked out late, took pride in providing for his family. After retiring, he started to slow down, put on some weight, and developed a mild case of sleep apnea that made him feel tired more often than not. His wife, Denise, was still active, still affectionate, but Harold started pulling away. At first, it was subtle, skipping hugs, avoiding eye contact when undressing, brushing off compliments with a joke. Eventually, he stopped initiating intimacy altogether. When he came to me, he was blunt. "I feel like a mess, Doc. I don't want her to see me like this." And I told him something I tell a lot of men. Most women aren't looking at you through a lens of judgment. They're looking for connection. But if you see yourself as unworthy, it doesn't matter what she sees, because you've already pulled the plug. What helped Harold wasn't a diet or a gym plan. It was something smaller but more important. We started working on his relationship with his body, not just his appearance. I asked him to do one thing a day that made his body feel more cared for, not to impress Denise, but to rebuild that sense of dignity. A warm bath in the evening, stretching in the morning, wearing a clean shirt he liked, even if no one was visiting. Slowly, those small acts chipped away at the shame. And the breakthrough came one evening when Harold and Denise sat quietly together watching a movie. She rested her hand on his stomach, and for the first time in months, he didn't flinch. That moment, as small as it was, opened a new chapter for them. It wasn't about performance. It was about being present, without apology. What often helps in cases like this is simply bringing back comfort into your body. One of the easiest ways is to make time each day to feel physically safe, not in a medical sense, but in a gentle one. That could be a 15-minute walk at your own pace, sitting in the sun with your shoes off, or getting a massage if that's something you enjoy. Even a quiet moment in a warm shower before seeing your partner can make a difference. These aren't cosmetic changes, they're acts of self-respect. The goal isn't to fix your body. The goal is to feel at home in it again. And I want to remind you of something I believe deeply. Your body is not the problem. Your body is the part of you that has carried you through every season of life. It's been strong when you needed it to be, patient when you've ignored it, and right now, it's asking for your kindness more than your criticism. You don't need to earn the right to be touched, seen, or loved. You already have that right. Sometimes the most intimate thing you can do is simply allow someone to be close, even when you feel imperfect. Because real connection doesn't require perfection. It just asks that you show up, and that is something you can do, starting today. Let's be honest, one of the most toxic thoughts that sneaks in as we get older sounds something like this. That part of life is over. It might not sound harsh at first. Maybe it even feels like acceptance. But underneath it, there's a belief that after a certain number of birthdays, intimacy, connection, and desire are supposed to fade away. And that belief doesn't just sit quietly. It works like a slow poison. You stop initiating. You stop hoping. You stop imagining. There could still be something real and warm and alive ahead. I want to tell you, as someone who's worked with hundreds of older adults, that idea is a lie. A very common, very culturally reinforced lie. And it steals good years from people who are still fully capable of love, touch, laughter, and, yes, desire. The truth is, sexual energy might shift with age, but it doesn't disappear. In fact, many people experience more meaningful intimacy in their 60s and 70s than they ever did in their 30s because they finally stop rushing, comparing, performing, and start connecting. I think of Bill when I say this. He's 74, lives in Santa Fe, retired school teacher turned amateur painter. He came to me because he felt stuck, not in pain, not depressed, just like everything intimate belonged to his past. His words were, "I'm not sad about it. I just figure that part of life closed up shop." What triggered his visit was a surprising moment. He'd attended a small local art show and met a woman named Carol, 62, who asked him about one of his watercolor pieces. They chatted for almost an hour. No flirting, nothing dramatic, just warmth and curiosity. But that night, something in Bill felt restless. "It's been a long time since someone really looked at me like that," he said. He wasn't talking about physical attraction. He meant attention, presence. Over the next few weeks, they kept bumping into each other at local events, started getting coffee together, eventually cooking meals at her place. That's when he hit a wall. As things got closer, he panicked. "I don't want to start something I can't follow through on," he told me. And what he meant was, what if I can't be who I used to be? We unpacked that together, and it became clear. The fear wasn't about ability, it was about permission. He had never given himself permission to feel wanted at his age. Society told him to stop thinking that way after 65, and he'd listened. But Carol hadn't. She was open, interested, and, most importantly, patient. They didn't rush into anything. They started with evening walks, shared stories, held hands, and slowly, the tension in Bill's body started to ease. One evening, he told me, they sat on the couch listening to Ella Fitzgerald, and for the first time in years, he felt something stir. Not just arousal, but a sense of being fully alive. That was the turning point. Not a performance, not a dramatic night. Just a quiet moment of connection that told his body, it's okay to feel again. What I often recommend to men in Bill's position is this: stop chasing sexuality and start building closeness. What often helps is doing simple things together that foster a sense of warmth. Cook a meal side by side, look at old photos and tell the stories behind them. Sit in silence and just hold hands. You're not trying to get somewhere. You're building trust, comfort, presence. That's the soil where desire grows. And once the body starts to feel safe and included, not judged or rushed, you'd be surprised how naturally everything else returns. And here's what I want to leave you with. Age doesn't close the door on intimacy. It just opens a different one. Think of it like changing seasons. Spring is about urgency and bloom. Summer is about heat and risk. But fall is slower, deeper, richer. There's still fire there, just not the kind that burns everything down. And winter? Even in winter, there are quiet nights full of warmth. You don't lose your capacity for connection. You simply get to discover new ways to experience it. If you're still breathing, you still get to feel. And that is more than enough. If any of these thoughts felt familiar to you, share in the comments which one hit closest to home. Maybe you have your own story. Tell us. It might help another man out there realize he's not alone. Support this video by giving it a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell icon. We're only sharing what truly works. And remember, you're stronger than you think. Your body isn't broken. It's just waiting for you to take it by the hand again. Life goes on.